Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, yeah. But you work with a lot of early career psychs, and I know there's no black and white answer to this, but based on your observation, what are the parameters or observations that you've made where, oh, you can tell that this early career psych is probably heading towards sort of like burnout and they're overworking the problem. What do you think it can look like? How do I identify for myself that, oh,
Yeah.
actually these are things that's going to take me there, maybe not now, but maybe in a couple of months' time?
Look, I think when we think about burnout and self-care, there's just like some really seemingly boring basics that you've got to always be looking at. It's like
Mm,
right pay, right conditions, right people. That's how I kind of think about it. It's like it, if you're working in a place, if a psychologist says to me, I'm struggling with the work, I'm very curious about whether they're struggling with the work or they're struggling with the conditions.
mm.
Because sometimes the two seem like the same thing and they're not. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so they might say to themselves like, I just feel like I'm like floundering. I'm not doing this well and that well. So well, tell me about your work. Like I'm seeing 6 clients a day. Being paid, barely anything. Um, my boss is weird. Uh, Said they were going to support me. I barely see my supervisor. Blah blah blah. I go okay. Let's work on that stuff because those things to me are predictive of burnout, and it's those bigger factors that are like really important to tackle. Was it saying? What was it saying? It's like don't major in the minors. Like it's like you're trying to micromanage things rather than looking at the bulk things. It's like, am I working too much? Am I being treated fairly, being paid
Mm.
fairly? Are the people around me supportive? Are they horrible? Or are they cold and isolate me? That sort of stuff, when those factors are all off, good luck with your self care. Like, good luck with, going home and doing a bubble bath or meditation. Like, it won't, I'm not saying don't do it, but it's like the band aid solution to the problem.
That's right. And
Mm.
what are the right conditions to work in? Of course, again, there's no absolutes, but
Yeah, yeah, sure,
basic
sure.
observations for
Yeah.
someone who's trying to figure out, okay, I don't know if I apply for this role, what to look out on, or what are the things you can observe in an interview or ask questions around, which would be like, oh, yeah, I think this hints towards at least a good working condition to begin with.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think I don't trust as much is like job ads. Like they're going to just be whatever they are.
Mm.
Every job ad says, "Would you like to work for a fun, vibrant team with blah 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 blah?" And it's like, okay. I mean, what else? What else is it going to say? Would you
Yeah.
like to work for a dodgy company that doesn't give you support? They're not going to put that in a job ad. So, a couple of really practical things I think about is these days on LinkedIn, it's not weird to reach out to people. So
Mm.
people have done that to me before. They've reached out to me when I've been in certain jobs and say, "Can you tell me what the actual job's like?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Like, I'll tell you what the day to day is like." I would say do something like that, like try and contact psychs that work at that company or work in that industry and
Mm.
say, what is it actually like? Like, what's a day like? I just want to know if I could actually handle it. Um, so I would think about stuff like that, basics. I would think about when you talk to the employers and things like that. When
Mm.
I've gone for jobs, sometimes I'll say, like, if I call and the contact person is like a HR person or a manager or something like that, I'll say like, are there other psychs there that I would talk to? And like, could I talk to them? And if they're really defensive about that, I might get a little suspicious. Um, but usually, like when I've gone to good places, they're like, yeah, well, if the psych's free, I'll tell them to give you a call. And like sometimes they don't because they're busy. But I think there's a sort of a lack of defensiveness that
Yeah.
I think is not guaranteed, but it's like, you should be able to, I think, ask a company things like, very openly and honestly, pay, conditions, do people leave, do they stay, all that sort of stuff is really helpful.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
a good one.
yeah, so I think about that. I think a lot about transparency and just finding out about the real day to day. That's the stuff that sometimes catches you off guard when you go, what do you mean we have to hot desk? I didn't know we had to hot desk. I thought we got our own desk. And it's like, no, no, tell me what the actual day to day is like. That's what I want to know.
That's right. I like that aspect of retention of the employees, like of your coworkers,
Yeah,
potential coworkers. I think that's a good question.
yeah, yeah. It's very important because you do see that sometimes when you look at job ads. like, oh,
Yeah,
they're advertising again. Is that because they're expanding, or has everyone left again? So that's important.
that's fascinating. Yeah. I actually never thought about it that way. Never thought to ask a question about retention. So I think this is some more food for thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what would it look like working with right people? Yeah. How would, again, I think it's self-explanatory to some extent, but also from a very psych perspective, Yeah, yeah.
For me personally, like the psychs that I've always loved working with, are just like very down to earth. They're not precious, like as in they'll just tell you, yeah, I stuffed that up, or there's this sort of being serious about the job but not taking themselves too seriously. That's for me very important because the work is serious.
Yeah.
It's good to be able to joke and laugh, and it's good to be able to talk to people who just honest and open about the work, saying, "Yeah, look, this is what it was really like. That's what it's really like." People that are like, I've worked on teams where people will knock on your door and just be like, "Hey, go on." I love that sort of stuff. That's that
Yeah.
like real, just simple, basic stuff. Like I'd always try and do that when I'm on teams. Just catch someone in the hallway. How's you going? It might just be like, "Yeah, good." Meh. Just to let people know, like, hey, if you need anything, like, I am actually free. It's that collegial environment. No one's trying to like one up the other person, all that sort of stuff. I think office politics really hits you harder as a psych in the sense that we do really emotionally draining work. So we don't have as much like gas in the tank for nonsense, if that
Mm,
makes sense. You
yeah.
don't want you don't want the tank to be drained by who has the better office chair and who has the bigger room and who, some nonsense like that. That sort of stuff just boy, it'll just drain you like nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. I agree to that. Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shrinks
It shrinks.
when
Yeah.
there's office politics. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you have right workplace, right people, right pay. And I think there was a fourth one that we discussed before, which was the right workload, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, true. Like that is one of the things. It kind of comes into that right pay sort of stuff in the sense
Yeah.
that right pay is often like, I guess if I was seeing one client a day, right, I wouldn't expect to be paid as much. But what often happens when early career psychs are struggling with the work and they're struggling actually with the conditions is, I'll ask them like, tell me a bit about what you do. Like, how many clients do you see? They'll say six. And I go, so you get paid pretty decently? They're like, no, I'm only getting paid like some disgustingly low amount. I'm like, wow. So you are being worked incredibly hard, six clients a day, 5 days a week. You're not getting paid well. That just gives you this feeling of being overloaded and undervalued. And there's just the like reality in my mind of forget the pay for a second. There's just the reality that what we do carries an emotional load. So
Mm,
where I see it go wrong for a lot of early career psychs is they're told we can't pay you much. We pay the senior psychs more because they do complex work, they have more experience, blah blah blah. But the early career psychs, when they come to supervision, they're talking about clients, and I'm like, that's a very complex client. How come you've got them? They I don't know, that they just said have a go. And I'm like, oh, see, I just don't think that's amazing. I think your workload should also factor in as a psychologist the complexity of the cases. You could have six very like straightforward clients, and that might feel just as like emotionally heavy as two incredibly complex clients. So that's one of those things you got to always be juggling. And if you're in a good workplace, like people are sensitive to that. They're open to discussions about that. They're open to you saying, hey, no, look, can I just like that referral? Can that go to someone else? I'm just full of like my caseload is full of complex clients. Those kind of things are very important for feeling safe, supported, but just for managing your stress levels. If you don't manage your workload, don't manage your caseload or your workload, you end up so stressed, and then you sort of normalize that as well. Like you start to see like if this is what you thought a complex client was, like it's like that bar keeps getting raised, and you start going, oh, that's not that complex, because you've got so many complex clients. And you start wondering, like, why am I feeling so stressed? Well, yeah, you've kind of normalized the conditions of what causes the stress. So being able to have peers and supervisors and hopefully employers that can be like, hey, we think you're taking on too much, have those kind of really honest conversations with you and support you. Super important.
That's right. That's very, yeah, interesting. It's like managing the not only the workload, but the type of clients you have with the right amount of pay, because you're right,
Mm,
can get really overwhelming really fast, and especially if you're not getting paid and there's so many complex clients.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So it sounds like me, this is a lot about boundary settings as well in the workplace, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the hard things is sometimes you don't, because you're new, you go, oh, is this that's the industry? Like, is this what it is? Like, am I getting an amazing opportunity and is this how it has to be? And that's why I think, our networks, I'm not a huge networker, but I found things like LinkedIn have been so helpful with that. Talking to people outside of your situation can be so key. Sometimes you don't even realize there's another company just down the road or another type of work that suits you better until
Hmm.
you talk to another psychologist. You go, what? You
Yeah.
get paid to do what? Or, they pay what? And they only get you to see four clients. Oh my goodness, like that sort of stuff is very, very helpful. So yeah, if you can, always try and like sample widely from like your opinions and the people you talk to, because your peers are such a great source of, helping you kind of navigate and find your feet, your supervisors as well, of what is like okay and what's not okay and what's sort of normal and whether normal is ethical or not. Because sometimes some things are a norm, but I wouldn't say they're ethical.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Yeah. So if I was an early career psych, what can I use to figure out my sort of way to know, okay, this is my good workload. This is a workload that I can work with. How can I figure that out for myself, without feeling the burden of taking on too much, not wanting to burn out, of course.
Yeah, I think ultimately there's a bit of experimentation, and I think that's why like a supportive company is important
Yeah.
because you might think, oh, I can do 6 clients a day, and then
Yeah.
a couple of months and you go, actually, and that number, like I think always try and find your number, which is like how many clients you can see a day without it like bleeding out into your personal life too much, right? Being able to maintain quality, being able to maintain quality of your health and your well-being, that ebbs and flows though, you know. If
Mm.
let's say you're going through some big life thing, like I remember when I was gonna get married, so what, 2019. That stage in my life affected how I saw the work and how I felt about the work because my mind was like obviously thinking about this is the next big chapter in my life. I'm going to get married, people have children, all those things. They really change uh, that number for you, right? If you're going through health problems. So again, this is why I'm always big on conditions. You have the right people around you. They help you to flex on that sort of stuff. They don't go, but I thought you said you could see 6 a day. It's like, yeah, well, my child was born yesterday. Like, can you give me a break? You want to have people that help you kind of figure that out and support you to figure that out. But the things you can kind of tune into on your own, I think, are when you get the conditions right, our job does follow you home somewhat, right?
Mm.
But you'll notice it more when you have the conditions wrong. Like you'll notice things like your sleep start getting affected. Maybe you start. For me, I will eat like crappy food more, and I like I'm sort of eating my feelings, or I'm just feeling more. I remember feeling more grey is the way I would explain it to people. It's just feeling like everything's blurring together. So there are these little markers for each person that are different, right? Where you go, ooh, I'm getting stressed because I'm noticing weight gain or I'm noticing, my sleep, I'm just not feeling rested. So when you start looking at that sort of stuff, what sometimes people do is they go, all right, I've got to like do some more meditation before bed and blah 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 blah. Maybe. Yeah, that could help, definitely. But also look at your day. Like what are you doing for the bulk of it? If for 8 hours of your day you're doing something, look at that because that might be the thing that's contributing to the stress. So it might mean dropping a client a day. It might mean you know, look, going over your caseload and going, I can't take on any more complex clients, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it sounds like it's a very like in terms of context, but I think really like the way you've put it that when you work, our work does follow us on, but when it's following more as becoming a part of your life after work, I think that's a very good.
Hmm.
independent of where you're at. And that
Yeah.
does affect the practice as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It completely it I'd love to pretend we could perfectly compartmentalize our lives, if only. But how you're feeling at home does come into work at times, and when how you're feeling at work comes into home at times. So
Mm,
sometimes you notice that the blur between the two becomes very severe. You know,
mm,
you're at home thinking about work all the time. You maybe, if you're running your own business like me, maybe you're doing emails at 9 o'clock at night or something, and that doesn't instantly mean you're doing something wrong. But for some people, that's an indicator that, wait a second, yeah, I've started to blur boundaries here. So
mm.
it's a kind of just getting to know your little signs and markers that things are sort of blurring together too much.
Yeah, that's right. One of the signs for me is like I feel entirely really out of it. So I can't
Yep.
focus. I can't just,
Yeah.
I just need to sit down and just zone out. I think
Uh-huh.
that's when my nervous system is so overwhelmed. It's
Yeah.
so dysregulated. And it's a good sign to just take a step back, do things that, fill my bucket before I can
Hmm.
actually go and even support other people. Because it's a very emotionally demanding process.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, that's pretty common, I think. I find myself zoning out on my phone. Like, I
Yeah.
notice if I'm stressed too much or I'm sort of taking on too much, rather than reading books, which I love to do, I'll just be on my phone, like, you know, YouTube shorts or Instagram reels or something. My mind's just trying to go switch off, but actually it's still being stimulated. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I have to kind of give myself the space to let the dust settle, let things
Yeah.
cool down in my head. But yeah, the big thing to do then is often to look at my work and go, well, why is my kind of head heating up so much? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Oh, right. Yeah, I saw, X amount of clients yesterday and wrote a report. Did I need to write the report on that day? No, I probably could have left it for the next day. Just things like that.
Yeah. And it's very fascinating. I think on the days that you have a good workload and you've had a good set of clients, not too complex, I feel more energized when I get home because I
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's that therapist high, that's what they call it. But it's just it's more it fills my cup and that's exactly why I'm in the profession.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so yeah, that's very fascinating. That's what I've observed for myself.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the reasons I split my time between, working in the clinic, mostly treating first responders with
Yeah.
PTSD, and
Yeah.
then supervising the rest of the time is that I find supervision very energizing for me. Like,
Yeah.
I can have a supervision session and sort of like bounce out of there. And I do love doing therapy, but it does affect me differently, and it affects me typically to kind of drain me more. So
Yeah.
it's sort of finding your own version of self care is really about figuring some of those intricacies out. Some people genuinely can. I've met psychologists that can see like 6 clients a day, and it doesn't seem to do too much to them. Like, you know, I know a lot of people claim that, and that isn't actually true. But I've genuinely met some people where they just don't seem to.
Wow.
Just doesn't do much to. Whereas me, 5 days of that, then you wouldn't be talking to me in the evening because I'd just be there like.
Yeah, that is me. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I can do supervision till the cows come home and I'm like excited and kind of want to keep going. So figuring out your kind of balance is about that too. It's like types of work. Some people don't do just therapy work. They do a little bit of therapy, they do a little bit of case management, they do a little bit of report writing, something like that.
That's actually interesting. Yeah. So the types of work. So through your process, through your 17 years of being a psychologist, what are the different types of work that you've also done, but you've also seen people do? Is there something that's really intrigued you, like, oh, that's very interesting for a psych to do? Has that happened?
I think I've worked pretty, I mean, I've always worked a little bit out of the mainstream in the sense of like,
Yeah.
started in Aboriginal medical service. So that
Mm.
was really awesome because, there were lots of like um, things that we did that I think were very effective, but they were just different. Like as in we might do like community events and they became really great ways to engage people and bring people into the
Yeah.
therapy room without saying, hey, come to the therapy room. Things like that. I worked for a gambling service where we did a heap of community education. I literally just like go to companies and talk to them about gambling and like, how to, so that sort of stuff was really fun. Like I do my therapy stuff, and then I'm like, cool, it's like totally justified for me to get paid to go visit this, club or something and talk to their employees about gambling, and how people
Yeah,
that work in the industry often struggle with gambling too. Like that sort of stuff can be really enjoyable, and people sometimes don't see it as legit psych work, but it absolutely is.
is yeah,
When we're looking at some societal issues, or most societal issues, there's an element of education and sort of like engaging the community that's super important. So that was really fun for me. I didn't think I'd like case management. I did heaps of it in
mm,
defense and I loved it. I loved sort of like working with the other professionals and having meetings around client care and just sitting down and being really practical and figuring that stuff out. If you'd told me at uni, like, hey, would you like to do lots of meetings? I'd be like, no,
yeah,
sounds terrible, but it was good because it was getting me out of the therapy space. Prior to that, I felt a bit burnt out from therapy, or I was heading that way. So to have to be able to do something that's legitimately what a psychologist does and expand my mind about what a psychologist does is really nice. And so I often encourage people. It's like before you throw it in, if some people say they want to throw it in with the industry, I say, try other forms of work. You can think of it as paid work experience. You're getting paid to try something. So, some people go for research jobs, some people go for case management roles, assessment,
off
report
stuff.
writing.
Yeah,
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. It's like, why not experiment with it? You took all this time studying and doing the internship. You might as well, like, it doesn't really affect you to jump around a little bit as much as people think.
yeah,
Um, I've never been to a job where they're like, well, you didn't work in mainstream, like, you didn't work in private practice for a million years, or you didn't work for health, or that sort of stuff is mostly in our heads.
yeah.
That, I've always been able to sort of bounce around and be okay. So,
Yeah, I think one thing I finished after I finished my uni and I got into the internship. I was like therapist, psychologist, or meant to just sit in the therapy chair, provide therapy, or do reports or assessment. And then soon through my internship, I actually realized that our skill set is so transferable, and it is so critical in such various industries.
yeah.
And I think that's the biggest, I guess, strength of being a psychologist, that it's
Yeah.
you can apply it, and of course if you need upskilling, but the crux of it, you can apply it in almost all industries, and it is really valuable because we do some really amazing studies, to get to become a psychologist. It's very in depth.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We actually have usually a pretty strong work ethic. So
Yeah,
around that sort of knowledge work and being able to do research and being able to sort of just wrap our heads around sort of concepts that aren't always straightforward. So that sort of stuff is like it's great to kind of remember when you're freaking out about like, oh, this job's not working for me. Maybe I have to throw it all in. It's like, well, slow down, have a look, um, search around the industry using like search terms that don't use the word psychologist. Sometimes you'll find jobs even in mental health that where
yeah,
they want someone that's had a psych background, but it's not therapy. It's like a little bit different. It's maybe like triage and assessment and like case management and all that sort of stuff. And you just didn't know it was there because you were literally going into Seek and typing in psychologist.
yeah,
Sometimes that's all
yeah.
you have to do to expand your kind of your view of things and realize, oh, we are really employable in other areas too.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and that's a hack that even I tried, because I was searching psychologists when I was looking for jobs, and there's like only private practice, only this, and then I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, there are only 20 jobs in my neighboring suburbs. That's still
Yeah,
yes, you know. So then that's why
yeah.
then I put mental health, and so many more came up. And being, I think, a psychologist, because you have that training, you're also somewhat more preferable, if especially if you have the experience as well in in different settings.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's right. And tell me a bit more about, so let's say hypothetically there's an early career psych and they want to find their feet. What are the support systems apart from the right workplace, right workload, right pay, and right people that they can start creating, sort of in terms of network, just a bit of a holistic approach so that they can find their feet while exploring, while working, and while just settling into the profession. What are the things they can do?
I mean, there's the usual stuff like the APS and AAPI and all these sort of like
Yeah.
organizations, but I think these days also they're kind of hidden gem that some people don't use enough is like LinkedIn and things like that.
Yeah.
It's I've been able to connect. I'm not like I wouldn't describe myself as like hyper social. Like I remember when I was younger, I went to APS meetings and was bored out of my brains. No offense, APS, but
Yeah.
I went to one and it was just like a bunch of psychs talking about politics, and I was like, nah, this is for me. So then I thought, oh, networking's not for me. But then things like LinkedIn, you know, they allow you to kind of like look and check someone out and be like, oh, they actually do the same thing I do, or they do something I want to do. Maybe I'll just reach out and have a talk to them, and you'd be surprised how many people will say, yeah, I'd love to have a talk and just
Yeah.
talk shop. And then you can start to chat more often and learn about different areas and learn about different ways of doing things and people's struggles. And that has been something that I've found recently that I probably undervalued, but now it's just like fantastic. If I so, I have people follow me on LinkedIn. So sometimes I'll see their name pop up a lot and I'll just reach out and be like, hey, thanks for the support. And would you ever want to have a chat? And so, I do that sort of thing a lot. That's been
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah, LinkedIn is really helpful that way because you have access to so many people just in like click.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if they don't want to talk to you, I guess they can block you too. So,
Yeah, but
so
I think
it's
on
good.
because it's on LinkedIn, it's like a assumed boundary that it's professional, which
Yeah.
really helps it,
Yeah.
otherwise even just sometimes email can be a little vague. But LinkedIn is very professional. It's like, okay, you can be very
Yeah.
clear about it. They can see who you are as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a hidden gem. I agree to that. And what are your thoughts on supervision and mentorship for early career psychs?
I think for me, I think it's bang for buck. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say it. I'm a supervisor. I don't do it as a business, but I practice what I preach. Like I'm at the moment, I'm getting fortnightly supervision just at the moment because I wanted it. Just wanted to talk through a few things, just examine my processes. But I think like when you look at the CPD stuff, once you're registered, you only need supposedly 10 hours of peer consultation or supervision. Personally, I think you should probably go for more, unless you're getting it like at work. I think people often they can navigate some trickier things if their supervisors are external to their company for good reason. Sometimes, even if your supervisor is really nice and lovely, sometimes they're also like senior psych to you or they're a manager to you. And that kind of just brings in some stuff or they're friends with the boss or something like that. So you don't want to say, hey, the boss is being mean or horrible or something like that. So I just usually say to people, with your supervision, don't do the thing that people have done when they get registered, where you go, I'm going to book supervision, I'm going to book some mentoring or whatever. I'll do that soon. You blink your eyes. It's now like June. Like, oh, I gotta get it done. Blink your eyes. It's now October, and you're scrambling at the end of the year for CBD. You're scrambling for support. That can happen because psychologists like once you start getting going, it's sort of like it just doesn't stop. I find so. Just be basic and boring, and book that stuff in once a month or whatever schedule, just recurring,
Yeah.
and just make that a part of your process that just takes care of itself. It's booked in once a month. You go to it, or more if you need it, but always have it. I'm 17 years of psych, and like today, I had supervision and I love it. I probably would, if I was rich, filthy rich, I'd probably just pay for it every week or something.
Yeah.
But I love it because it honestly, for me, it's been bang for buck with learning. There's just things I can talk about that I can't get at a workshop. There's things that I can learn in real time out of supervision that I can't get out of like a workshop or a book or something like that. So, yeah, my thing is just make it part of your practice. I mean, we have to do it anyway for opera, but find the right supervisor and don't look back.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's beyond just the mandatory requirement of I think supervision has so many benefits. It's just having space to really unpack so you don't have to hold everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it builds confidence. That's what I've observed. It builds confidence because yeah, sometimes you're doing the right thing and you just doubt yourself because it's imposter syndrome because there's no feedback from a professional like a supervisor. I think that helps.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you can easily get in your head with this work.
Yeah,
Just be sitting
yeah,
there thinking, I'm terrible. And then you talk to your supervisor and they say, oh, it sounds like did a good job. You go,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
did I?
That,
Oh, or your supervisor says, like, oh, that sounds like a really complex client. You're like, oh, good, because I thought I was just floundering and I was an idiot. So just having those
Yeah.
conversations can be just worth their weight. So
That's right. That's right. And I like the idea. Just book it monthly or fortnightly, and then you can always cancel. I think it's the similar thing most of the clinician advise their client, just book it and you can always
yeah,
plan. It's like priorities. Yeah.
yeah,
That's good.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, wonderful. And I wanted to touch base on something. So, once I finished my internship, there were a couple of options to go through. One was like the subcontractor contract. I still don't know which one it is. And the other one was employment, right? Now,
yeah,
employment is pretty straightforward. I don't think there's any nuances to this. But I think when I started in just looking into the contracting space, there were so many things that I didn't know, like in terms of, oh, do I have to register my GST? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? What's the right type of insurance? Or
yeah,
so many things. But I tried to, and that's when I met, that's exactly when I contacted you through LinkedIn, because I was like, I need support around it, right? So if I were to go back, I would come up with a series of questions. But I would really like to know if there's an early career psych wanting to do contracting, what are some series of questions they can ask, let's say for the practice they want to contract with, to know if that's the right fit for them? Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I know it looks different for a lot of,
yeah,
but
for
there are some
everybody.
standard things I think that needs to be asked.
Hmm. Yeah, I think like the way I think about contracting is like, well, this is my way of thinking about it. So
Yeah,
there's no perfect way to think about it. But like if you're going to be an employee, there's a lot of safety there.
yeah,
But also, you're then very much within the company's kind of way of doing things.
mm,
If you're a contractor, personally, why I contract is a bit more freedom.
mm,
That's like I like the first thing I ask people to do when they're talking about this stuff is like, tell me what the reasons are. Like, what are your values behind it? What are you aiming for? Because sometimes people have the wrong idea about it. They think they're going to get filthy rich and make people money, blah blah blah. So it's good to be realistic and think about things like, all right, like what are the conditions again? I keep harping on about conditions, but if you're going into this, like to talk to a company, it's like you want to know what the split is. You
wait,
want to
wait,
know.
explain. Let's say there's an early career psych who doesn't know what the split is. Explain the split.
Oh, okay. So like if you see, um, you know, five clients and you make $200 per client, then you get a split of that because the company you're contracting to carries like all these overheads. They're paying for the rent, they're paying for the photocopier, the reception, everything, the systems. So they take a cut, like they might take 40% and you get 60%, right? So a 60-40 split, that's pretty standard.
That's the usual standard. Sometimes it's 70-30 as well, where the contractor
Yeah.
gets 70 and they get the 30. Yep.
Yeah, I mean the split is something that's not like when we say it's an industry standard, it's not like in some sort of like book. It's just like
Yeah,
what
it's just
it's just kind
free
of what
market decision. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So sometimes you'll go to different places, they'll have different setups.
Yeah.
I've met psychs that contract where it's 60-40, except for assessments, it's a different split. It's like a bit
Yeah.
complicated. I prefer simplicity. Um, so yeah, I would always ask about the
Yeah.
money.
True.
Like, what's the split? Like, you need to understand, like, what are you going to earn? And
Yeah.
is it better for you to just be an employee?
Yeah.
Um, like, what are the expectations around taking clients on? Like, if I'm an employee, I still think you should be able to say no to things. But I particularly think as a contractor, you want to be able to say no to a lot of things because for me, it's about freedom, right? Like to be able to go, hey, I want to come in and do this kind of work. You can find places that are like that. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. Um, the company isn't being unreasonable if they, I think, say, no, we want you to see like the full gamut. That's just the way they run their business. So it's just good to know, like, what would you expect me to see? Like, if you're someone who mostly works with adults and they work with kids too, are you going to have one of those moments where you look in your calendar and you go, what is the 13-year-old doing in my calendar? And oh, we just put them in because you're free. And you want to be very clear on that stuff at the start. You want to just know what is expected of you from that. You want to know whether they have some like KPIs around clients.
Yeah.
Some places don't. Some
Yeah.
places expect you to fill the books because they want to make a certain amount, and maybe that can work in your favor if you work for a place and they want you to see 5-6 clients a day, and you're like, that's great because I want to make 5-6 clients worth of money after the split. Yeah, that might work for you. So you just think
Yeah.
about those kind of conditions,
Yeah.
and then you ask some basics like, what happens if a client doesn't show up? Is there a cancellation fee?
Yeah.
How successful is the company in actually getting the thing is a different story. Some places will say we have a cancellation fee and then they can't really get it, or they don't really follow through with it. A bit different for things like NDIS and with New South Wales work cover. I'm pretty sure we can't. No, I don't think we can charge a fee if they don't turn up. So it's just asking that sort of stuff, and then also like funding sources, like what kind of clients do you see? Do you
Yeah.
get NDIS clients? Do you get CIRA clients, work cover clients? Do you get mostly Medicare? Do you get open arms? Do you get blah blah blah? Because that changes the rates, and that changes
Yeah.
obviously what you make per
Yeah.
split, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
true.
all of that stuff. And again, when we come back to what we were talking about with employers and workplaces, there should be transparency. There shouldn't be too much defensiveness on this. If they're giving away things that are like, their secrets as a business, or, I mean, that's a different story, but that's basic stuff. Like you
Yeah.
want to be able to know you're safe to come in and make around X amount a day when you go in there. Basic things like, what are the hours? Like, I know this might sound dumb, but I've seen contractors go to places where they just assumed that the reception would be there from like 9 to 5 or 9 till 7 when they were. And then they found out that, like, they come out at 5 o'clock and the last 2 hours they're by themselves in the building. So just like simple stuff like that.
Yeah.
I know you might assume that stuff is happening properly, but it's not. Maybe you would just ask and people would be like, of course. And okay, cool. Now we know. So just ask like anything like that you want to know, but get the basics like what does your day look like? How much money are you going to make? Um, you know, anything like that. Just ask whatever you want. Right. And literally write a list of questions if you want. Take it to
Yeah.
the people. Yeah.
I did that. I wrote a list of questions after the first meeting with you, and then I was like, the other questions I'm gonna ask. It Of course it doesn't give you like a proper, oh, this is gonna be the right decision maker, but it gives me a good idea of what's this organization like, what's the other organization like, and then I it helped me make a decision, and then I think it helped me align with my values, whether this
Yeah.
is what I
Yeah.
want to do. Is this okay? Even if it's not that much pay, or if it's not normal, or is it okay? Yeah, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. I can do with that. Okay, I'm okay with not having admin after hours because there are other clinicians working with me. So that's okay.
Yeah.
But asking the question was so important.
Yeah, exactly. You just want to know, like you want to feel safe and supported to be able to ask. And yeah, I think you made a good point. It's like it's not always just about hard figures. Like there's
Yeah.
things like values are important. For me, if I went to work at a place and they were very like controlling or something, like
Yeah.
freedom is very important to me. The freedom to like when I work, I contracted a place where it's like if I have a no show, I just go to the gym. No one's like, everyone's like, hey, cool, enjoy. No one's like,
Yeah.
oh, can you call this person or do this thing? It's like, nah, I'm a contractor. See you later. But I don't even have to do that because they're so chill.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
so good to me and so nice to me, and it's just a collegial environment.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm always looking for with contracting. I don't want to contract. I want to have the freedom to come and go a bit if I wanted to, but within reason. Like I don't want to just like leave the company in the lurch. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's this sort of freedom that I value with contracting. But
Yeah.
there's also like a little less safety. So I always say to people, there's no like wrong or right. It's just what's wrong or right for you, and values and things like that do very much come into play there. So you should think about that stuff too.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of being a psych, is a reflection. And that's a good skill set to have, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. And I wanted to just wrap up a podcast, but it's been so interesting to just talk about various aspects about just from the starting developing your practice to responsibility, burnout, and then this bit. But if there was any early careers like listening to this, and if they had to take one piece of, I wouldn't call it insight, but just either suggestion or no, I wouldn't call it advice, either suggestion or insight, what would you like to say to them, apart from contact me? I'm providing the solutions, and I would really recommend that, because that is very important when you start.
Thank you.
What that
Yeah.
would.
Look, I would just say to people, just be clear. I get clarity in your career. That's one of the things that
Yeah.
I think it does help to talk to other people to get clarity, but you can do it yourself too. But get clarity about what you want, what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, conditions, conditions, conditions. That's what I would think about. And it's okay to experiment to get there. You're
Mm,
not always going to land perfectly when you come out of uni. Some people think, I hate the industry, and then they try another area of the field and they go, oh, this is great. But there's no, don't feel silly about that. Most of us got lucky in that I found a degree that I loved. Well, I liked some parts I didn't love. I found work that I loved. That's a bit of luck on that part. So if you get out and you go, I hate this, feel okay to experiment and just keep thinking about conditions.
yep, that's right. Yeah. And I think you use a term which was expert versus experience, which I really like being using the lived experience and really honing into that, and then letting that guide your career as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like we have to be careful using terms like expert and things like that in our industry, but it's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. One thing I always say to people to try and give them confidence is like the one thing you can be an expert on is your own experience, right? So
Mm,
if I don't care if you have a day in the industry. Sometimes when people see me writing things on LinkedIn, they're like, "Oh, how do you write that stuff?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just writing about experiences. I'm not trying to position myself as like the expert on like what you have to do." And
exactly.
everyone can do that when you want to do some self-reflection or you want to like journal or you want to express yourself. You can just tap into your own experience and be like, what has it been like for the last year? Like, what have I noticed? And what could I kind of teach myself from a month ago? Tapping into that sort of stuff can actually give you a bit of confidence to go, oh, wow, I've actually come a long way. I
Yeah.
just didn't even think about it. Maybe a year ago I was at uni stressing out about exams, and now I'm here and stressing out about an ethical case or something, some sort of conundrum like that. It's good to reflect like that and think about that. The career is a bit of a journey in that um,
Yeah.
respect. Yeah.
That's actually nice. Yeah, it is a journey. Absolutely right. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Then one thing I learn every time I speak to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, and just making this time out of your busy life to come here and speak, and just shows how passionate you're about helping early career psych.